There are many Souls-like games on the market nowadays, from Nioh to Lies of P, Berserker Kazan to Wuchang. Each takes something from the revolutionary aspects of the Dark Souls franchise and tries to make it their own. That's not surprising since the Dark Souls trilogy, Bloodborne, and Elden Ring are some of the best games ever made, if you can overcome the difficulty curve and not smash your controller dying to the plethora of insane bosses. Because if you can, the sense of accomplishment is unparalleled. Looking back at Souls-like games, two characteristics seem to transfer over more than others: the atmosphere and setting. Of course, there are distinctions between the various games' mechanics, character designs, and worlds, but it really felt like medieval or Victorian aesthetics dominated the landscape. That's why I was so intrigued by The Surge, a game developed by Deck 13 Interactive and their second foray into the Souls-like genre after their muddled 2014 attempt, Lords of the Fallen. The Surge adapts the scope, narrative, and scenery of what a Souls-like game usually is, with unique gameplay dynamics, an intriguing if not convoluted story, all within a beautifully corrupted futuristic dystopia filled with corporate malfeasance and science fiction philosophy. The game doesn't steer far away from the core mechanics of what makes Souls-like so popular: intricate levels worth exploring, unique character builds, and running back to grab your souls after death. In this case, tech scrap. And if you're a fan of the genre, you may be asking yourself why you've never heard about this game. Looking online, it's rarely recommended in posts, even with a sequel coming out in 2019. The franchise doesn't get much recognition, and there might be some reasons for that. However, I think there is enough in The Surge to warrant a video on it, despite its shortcomings, so let's get started. The game's opening cinematic sets up the premise. The world is on its last legs due to massive environmental degradation. Famine, floods, ice caps melting, the outlook is bleak. But then there's Creo.
Creo is not just another company.
The corporate video marketing is strong, explaining to the viewer that Creo's Project Resolve will heal the planet back to its original state. It's intentionally ambiguous, showing rocket launches around the globe and other high-tech products produced by the company. The PR doesn't stop there, as we're introduced to Don Hackett, the spokesman for Creo, naming off all the achievements the company has provided for humanity.
Creo is one of the world's largest manufacturers of consumer and industrial products, but we're so much more. And that's why you're here. At Creo, we're always reaching for the stars. See?
My propaganda meter was already going off 3 minutes into the game. We gain control of our main character, Warren, who's a paraplegic on his first day at the Creo facility. The place was giving heavy Half-Life 2 vibes, and something felt very off about the lack of people around the terminal, excluding the heavily armed guards. And our first gameplay choice, picking which exoskeleton we want fitted. I kind of liked how the game doesn't need to tell you that's what Warren is here for, but shows you instead. There are only 2 choices at this time, but as you progress further into the game, there was a good number of armors to choose from. For now, the options are the Rhino, a heavy operator, or the Lynx, focused on agility. I knew I was going to get my ass kicked a ton, so I went with the Rhino. Oh, this is kind of cool, it's like Deus Ex.
Patient sedated. Initiating surgery.
Oh god, what's happening? Without the proper sedation, the grotesque surgery is performed on Warren and we black out from the pain. Is he going to get workers' compensation for that? Warren wakes getting dragged by a drone for disassembly, surrounded by dead bodies, and the game truly begins. We start the pseudo-tutorial and the first taste of basic combat, using an old piston as a weapon. There's your typical lock-on system, which flows into vertical and horizontal attacks, plus a dodge and blocking mechanic, which is simple at first. The drones here are easy enough to deal with, giving the player time to explore their surroundings. We've somehow ended up in the rocket yard, where the discarded remnants of Project Resolve's launches have ended up. For 2017, this game looks great, with some sharp environmental details and lighting. The level design aesthetics also played a huge factor of why I enjoyed exploring so much. No matter which area you find yourself in, each had a specific purpose and function within the world itself. If you've watched my other videos, you know I like when a world feels lived in, and even though you'll see actual humans sparingly throughout the journey, Creo's extensive campus felt real. We find the Surge's version of a bonfire, but are missing an intact power core for our exosuit, making the medbay inaccessible. Luckily, in the same room, we meet our first friendly NPC, who says there should be one around the area. Although we don't know her name yet, Warren questions the woman on what happened and why there are so many dead bodies, but she's not really helpful, only telling us to search the factory. The Surge definitely took the vague dialogue hints of Dark Souls, but to an extreme, with many moments scratching my head at what I was supposed to be doing. I did find it interesting that even though we're told to fix the exosuit, Warren views it differently, saying that this is the first time he's been able to walk since being handicapped.
It's the least of my problems. I mean, I can walk. Huh. Never thought I'd be able to say that again.
Unfortunately, this is as far as introspection goes for Warren, as the game rarely focuses on his backstory or thoughts on the situation he finds himself in, which was kind of a letdown. Now, if drones were a simple way of introducing the player to the feel of combat, we get our first real enemies, and one of the better gameplay mechanics of the Surge. Every enemy has specific body parts. Some are unarmored, which are vulnerable and take more damage, but you'll be missing out on something. Consecutively attacking specific armored body parts of an enemy will result in the ability to chop off that limb, head, or torso, resulting in a new schematic that you can craft. If you have already acquired that schematic, it will instead drop the crafting material needed for upgrading said schematic or your weapon. This mechanic is great because it lets the player decide how they want to deal with each encounter. There were moments throughout the game where I really wanted a new armor set or upgrade material, so I had to focus on the armored spots of specific enemies, making those encounters more difficult. Then when I wanted to go back to an area of interest or boss fight, I could just focus on the non-armored areas to make the path quote-unquote easier. Regardless of how the player disposes of enemies, you're always going to get something because everything drops souls, tech scrap. Tech scrap is the player's way of paying for upgrades, whether it's your weapon, armor, or suit. Weapons and armor are pretty straightforward, but what I really enjoyed is how you upgraded your exoskeleton. Starting off, your exosuit has only 4 implant slots, but by upgrading your suit with tech scrap, you'll access more slots. Implants allow players to customize their build with an emphasis on customization. It's not like you have to restart your build every time you want to change something. You'll just need enough core power for each implant. This makes playing around with builds fun because there is no penalty for trying something new. Having trouble with a boss? Implant yourself with a vitality injection that heals you to full health. Not dealing enough damage? What about 20+ damage to weapons when used? There are a lot of implants like that, and then there are some more on the fringes, like utilizing your energy meter for attack speed or buffing your drone later in the game. Seeing the impact that implants have on your build makes you instinctively search them out while exploring, since they're scattered around the various levels, sometimes out in the open and sometimes hidden away off the beaten path. Now you might be asking yourself, what the hell are we fighting here? And it's a great question, because at the beginning of the game, I thought they were like mechanical zombies, which I guess wasn't far off. The factory is completely ransacked and occupied by slow-moving humanoids and exoskeletons similar to our own, but don't seem to be conscious. Graffiti is scrawled on the walls about Project Resolve being a lie, and audio logs are mentioning a terrorist attack and a serial killer on the loose. But we don't get an explicit answer just yet. Warren still needs to find a way into the inner facility, which leads to another great feature of the Surge: exploring. Within the first level, the design team shows the player that they should be searching for routes back to the medical bay, or as the game dubs it, Ops Center. There has to be a long and specific German word for finding a shortcut back to the bonfire after a grueling fighting section, like Shortcutten auf Barren, or something like that. The feeling you get finding an elevator lift back to a familiar zone after barely surviving an area filled with baddies and hazards is pure bliss. Another facet of this learning is the map, and getting familiar with all the shortcuts and routes you can take, which feels rewarding. There is no in-game map, so you kind of have to make your own. All of this solidifies the gameplay loop. Find the Ops Center, explore a new area, fight new enemies, find new implants, load up on tech scrap, and pray to God that you'll find a shortcut back to the medical bay before you run out of vitality injections and lose everything. And I do mean lose everything, because there is one mechanic that I disliked a lot. Your drop tech scrap after death has a timer on it. I don't know why they implemented this, because from my perspective, it doesn't add anything to the game. It might actually take away from someone trying to explore farther than they think they can. Every time you die, your tech scrap gets dropped by your place of death, and in a typical Souls fashion, you need to retrieve it. The Surge uses the same mechanic, but you only have 2.5 minutes to retrieve it or it's gone. You can defeat enemies to add to the timer, but that only gains you like 15 to 30 seconds, and with how combat is on the slower side, you might be better off trying to run past than try to extend the time. This mechanic hurts a lot when you've progressed far into a level without finding a shortcut, or when levels become labyrinths and your knowledge of the layout is subpar. With this example, I was a second or two away from getting my scrap back, but one bad turn or one encounter too much sent my progress back without another death, just a time constraint. If you've played the game, I'd appreciate hearing your take on this. Anyways, let's get back to Warren. Oh, he's in a boss fight?
Error. Bypassing. Error. Bypassing. Bypass successful.
Damn, I didn't really intend to go back to back on the downsides of the game, but here we are. The Surge's boss fights were visually intriguing and mechanically annoying. The game does not adequately prepare you for any of the boss encounters. Up until this point with the first boss, no gameplay mechanic or hint has prepared you. The enemy's movement has been slow to normal. You've learned how to block, dodge, and cut off limbs. And then you get put into a tiny arena with the frickin' mech from RoboCop. The boss does have targetable points, but you're not going to be chopping off any metal. Plus there is a gauge below the health that I had no idea what it was for, since getting it to full never did anything. After dying many times and needing to take a break for a while, which is important in any Souls-like game, I bit the bullet and looked up the mechanic that I was missing. It turns out you need to stand under the boss when he fires the rockets, thus knocking him down and allowing the player to smack him. How you would understand that from the first hour of gameplay, no idea. Every other projectile the player has encountered had to be dodged at a distance, not close up to the enemy, and this is not the only boss with this specific problem. Regardless, Pax is defeated and we gain access to production deeper into the facility. It was an eerie feeling walking into Central Production B. The place was clean compared to the rocket yard and factory. Lights were working and the TVs were still showing PR videos, talking about how much good Creo does for the world.
Project Resolve is designed not as a band-aid, but as a cure. With every launch, the integrity of our atmosphere is being strengthened. With every rocket's payload, our world is being reseeded for future generations.
The videos do give us more of an insight into what Project Resolve was trying to accomplish. Each rocket was sent into orbit with some sort of atmospheric payload, trying to reverse the effects of climate change. Why the graffiti called it a lie? Well, that's something I wanted to find out. Just around the corner, we get our drone, who can unlock certain areas and help us in combat. Warren is still desperate to find out what the hell is going on, asking again where everyone is. To which the drone replies, the network is offline. Well, that's 0 for 2 in that line of questioning. The main way you'll start somewhat understanding the story is through audio logs, and I have to say that the voice acting for them is impeccable.
She said I should get to the executive level, that it's safe there. Security forces have it locked down, but it's the getting there that's the problem. She said things will soon be under control, and they've asked for external aid. It tells you how serious things have gotten if they've called for outside help. How much time has passed? Minutes? Hours? Days? This place is falling apart. I'm falling apart. I was told it wouldn't hurt, that the whole thing would be over in just a couple of minutes. But the pain when it started. I was awake. It cut open my flesh, pierced into my bones. I can still hear the machines, feel them, and I screamed. Just screamed until there was no air left in my lungs.
Lots of narratives go through this medium, whether it pertains to the main story or world building. It was always interesting to hear a new audio log to get that next snippet of information. Another way information is conveyed is through Sally, the woman who's been communicating with us via hologram, but her responses are so vague that I didn't know if I could trust her. We can ask again what has transpired, but she only says some sort of malfunction has occurred, and we can't follow up on that. She does mention that she's the head of the medical staff in the executive form, where the CEO and other bigwigs are located, but they're stuck there because of lockdown protocols, and apparently, we're the only person she's been able to contact, pleading with us to find a way to her. How we're supposed to get to the executive form, no idea. There wasn't any hint about 2 bells needing to be rung or be on the lookout for this particular area. Nothing. I'm split on this because on one hand, exploring blindly brought a lot of amazing discoveries, which was rewarding. On the other hand, I got stuck multiple times trying to figure out where I should go. While running around like a chicken without a head, Warren finds some survivors. Hobbs is the first telling Warren that he blacked out before everything went foobar, and we might want to check the failsafe consoles to see what they recorded. Coincidentally, there is one right next to him, which divulges Creo's personal systems, i.e. the exoskeletons and neurolinks, have reported significant deviation and physical degradation due to a system-wide malfunction. That makes more sense why the enemies are cognitively impaired and trapped in their working exosuits. It makes me shiver thinking that 1 second you're working and the next your brain gets fried because of some rounding error. Even scarier is that there's a video talking about another Creo invention, the Dream Tour.
That's right. With Creo's Dream Tour systems, or DTS, you can go anywhere in the world and even beyond. DTS feeds directly into your neural interface, and voila! You're on a beach in Rio, or Mardi Gras in New Orleans.
The Dream Tour system is akin to the Matrix, where a person's neural link will simulate weeks or months of a false reality in a matter of real-time hours. So is everyone that's been affected just in some sham reality with no ability to leave? Is Warren in the Dream Tour? Anyways, our second real person we meet is Davy, who has locked himself in a utility room. How Warren, Hobbs, and Davy weren't affected by the malfunction, I was not certain at this point. The only caveat we know is that Warren's Neuralink and exosuit surgery was botched, so maybe he wasn't part of the system. Even odder is that you can find security guards that aren't shuffling husks, warning Warren not to come any further and don't take any questions. The malfunction doesn't stop at workers either, as this next portion of the level has you battling robots. Arc robots. Where have I seen this before? Production B culminates with another boss fight, which at least has some similarities to the level's gameplay. You have to focus on the robot's limbs in phase 1, and once those are lopped off, it becomes a slash and dodge fight. Even though the mechanics are familiar, the tempo of this fight is extremely fast, which took some getting used to. Finally, the Clanker is defeated and we can advance to the next level, the Resolve Biolabs. Immediately entering the facility, Warren is alerted that the area is under quarantine. Audio logs describe workers trying to escape to no avail, and I had to chuckle that leaving the ops center had a unique voice line.
I'm not authorized to stop you, but it is not recommended that you leave operations.
There's some mysterious substance spilled out from the vats surrounding the Resolve labs, and another worker's audio log reveals that Creo knew about its poisonous effects but didn't care.
You know this stuff is toxic, right? We can't just keep dumping it wherever on the facility. We've had another accident. Well, thank God he's only a cripple. Or is it cheaper for the company if they're killed outright? Listen, if the EHA ever heard of any of these incidents, we'd be closed down faster than one of those rockets goes up.
Deeper into the facility, Warren discovers test areas for Project Resolve that were focusing on the same substance's toxicity, and holy moly, was Project Resolve, the quote-unquote last hope for humanity and climate renewal, actually harmful? Warren lifts the quarantine and lockdown, allowing further access to the biolabs, but at a small cost, and another interesting design change. The Surge has moments where a player's actions environmentally, for this instance unlocking the quarantine protocol, changes enemies' locations and adds new ones as well. I guess Creo didn't like us snooping on their secret, and now outside the labs are flamethrower squads, ready to burn the place down with us included. I really enjoyed these moments because it felt like our progression meant something apart from leveling up. And just like the security guards in Production B, these firebats didn't seem affected by the malfunction either, so who was calling the shots? With the quarantine lifted, Warren finds Dr. Chavez and we get actual information without an NPC being vague. Dr. Chavez was the lead researcher on Project Resolve and admits that the toxicity we found in the biolabs was indeed caused by her project. When Creo figured that out, they fired her publicly, yet still had her working on trying to fix the whole poisoning the Earth issue, but didn't stop the payloads from being deployed because it would look bad. Jeez. Dr. Chavez also mentions that the Creo board greenlit another humanity-saving project by another researcher, Barrett, and I'm sure that endeavor was less destructive.
I won't let you destroy our only hope, just because it offends their delicate constitutions.
Oh, I'm jumping the gun there. Dr. Chavez eventually gives Warren a USB drive with her fix for Project Resolve and tells him to bring it to the only board member she trusts up in the executive forum. That's where Sally wants us to go too. Back at the Ops Center in Production B, Warren questions Sally about his findings, but she dismisses them as hearsay, which made me doubt her even more.
Creo actively destroying the atmosphere to keep funding going. Or my favorite, the rich person's pleasure palace in orbit. Come on. We're not that gullible. And besides, the rest of the world would have noticed.
Either way, everything was leading to the executive forum, but getting there is a long journey through decontamination facilities, service access points, and rocket production. Oh, that's a boss, isn't it? This 3-phase monstrosity had a great aesthetic, but was incredibly annoying to fight, especially since the final phase required the camera not to bug out, which I didn't understand until my 12th attempt. Just past the boss, Warren's fat ass falls through one of the maintenance ducts and we end up in the exhibition hall.
Does a garden bloom overnight? Was Rome built in a day? We all know the answers to these questions. So why do people expect the rebuilding of the atmosphere to happen so quickly? After all, it took almost 2 centuries to make it this way.
The PR videos were off-putting at the beginning of the game, but now knowing that Project Resolve was a sham, even detrimental to the world, seeing Hackett publicly talk about patience when it comes to reversing course is anger-inducing. But that's not the worst Creo has to offer. Warren starts finding audio logs about what sounds like a virus, infecting people's flesh and taking over their bodies.
Overnight, it's evolved. The dots have become structures, thick black veins underneath my skin. Sclerotic. It's no longer human tissue, it's something else. I went up to Ops and took some samples from my lower right leg. The structures there are more developed. The area is completely numb, there was no need for anesthesia. Cutting into the overlying layers of skin, I removed several cubic millimeters of tissue. Analyses are still running.
In an adjacent room to the exhibition hall, we find Dr. Barrett, the researcher for Project Resolve's successor, Utopia. He's under the impression that Warren is working for the board and wants him to look around and check if everything is ready. Immediately, you get the sense that this might be worse than Resolve.
Utopia is a better solution in the long run. It doesn't have the side effects of Resolve. Well, not exactly true. It has one large cataclysmic side effect.
Barrett's Project Utopia revolves around nanites and the next evolution for mankind. Yeah, I let out a groan. Instead of trying to save the Earth, Barrett believed that humanity must transcend the environmental boundaries of our flesh and bone bodies to something more machine-oriented. He even knows that this would kill 99% of the people on Earth if the nanites were released, but that doesn't deter him, saying that overpopulation was a problem and Utopia would solve it. The audio logs Warren has been finding are from people who had the nanites take over and presumably who were fighting throughout the level. This was the moment when I had to take a step back from the game and just take a breath. The enemies we've been killing, mutilating, and eviscerating are all victims of Creo's scientific pursuits. Whether it was the normal worker succumbing to some system error or Barrett's experiments, none of them had any power to fight back or push back. Even the scientists who knew something was wrong, whether it was the toxicity from Resolve or the cataclysm Utopia would bring, were not listened to by the higher-ups. This perspective shift, at least for me, gave the surge a lot more emotional weight than I had anticipated. Warren does end up finding Barrett, who is unapologetic about Utopia and reveals that the board of Creo has been deliberating on whether to launch Utopia for weeks, but haven't decided yet. You can even side with Barrett, leaving him alive to keep experimenting with his abominations, but I couldn't let him live after all the pain he's caused. Killing Barrett initiates the next sequence, as the exhibition hall is populated now by security personnel searching for us and in Production B. It's a great way of adapting older levels with stronger enemies and new positions. With security squads fully deployed throughout the facility, Sally thinks this is the best opportunity we have to reach the executive form, by beelining it through Security HQ. She does mention that we'll need to find a security clearance since she's locked out of their systems, but something's amiss. Throughout the game, there has been an audio log narrative of another survivor, who we've never met. She's documented her own journey, which is eerily similar to ours, noting how Sally has helped her navigate each section of the facility just like us.
To get me killed, I know it. She made me go through security, right through their damn HQ. Said there was no other way. Sure. The vent system would have been a better option. Even the main entrance was less guarded. I nearly got killed because of her. I am so stupid to put all my trust in her. But who else have I got?
Why would Sally be leading multiple survivors to the executive form? Why would she lead us to death? Well, let's find out. To get authorization, we need to defeat the Black Cerberus, the elite guard of the board, and is the best boss fight of the game. Finally, a humanoid boss. Well, for half the time. With the energetic chunker taken care of, we get our final exosuit upgrade and can pass through any security clearance. This was awesome because in earlier levels, you'll find these locked security areas and have no way in. Even though I didn't play Next Game Plus, I'd assume it worked and gave you lots of goodies. Anyways, we make it to the executive forum, which was a breath of fresh air aesthetically. Gone are the tight corridors and darkened rooms of R&D and production, and hello to a brightly lit hotel lobby. And things are still foobarred here, like majorly messed up. Warren finds the other survivor's last audio tape and her succumbing to her injuries. Right after that, in the CEO's room, there is a recording of himself realizing that Utopia is a failed project. And then we hear the board is still voting on whether to approve Utopia for the next launch, with one vote pending due to a medical emergency. You thought that was it? Nope. Exploring the executive forum more, the player can unlock the media room, which is a drop the controller moment. Hackett has taken his own life and recorded his last words on loop.
After a lifetime of speaking on camera, I'm suddenly lost for words. I'm sorry, Rianne. I could have been a better husband, a better father. I wanted to make it right, prove I could make a difference. Well, I made a difference. It's not the one I'm proud of.
This was striking not only for the depiction of his actions, but realizing every time we saw him on screen that he had been dead for days. His final words acknowledged that Creo knew their projects were wrong, but he stayed their spokesman, spinning their lies anyway despite knowing that Utopia would synthesize all human life into machines with a large mortality rate. And finally, there's the boardroom. I was expecting Warren to enter and the board would be having pina coladas and cigars, but no. This is my interpretation of what happened from going over the information I had prior to this reveal and looking at different theories online. I might have to freeze frame because this is a lot of information. The board knew long before the events of the game that Project Resolve was a failure. Instead of helping the Earth's climate, it poisoned it. As an alternative, Barrett's nanite invention was taking center stage, even with it being rushed. The board initiated a vote to decide whether the next rocket payload would be filled with Resolve's formula or Utopia's nanites. Sally, who is now revealed to be an AI responsible for the medical well-being of the whole facility, determined if Utopia were to pass, that it would mean the death of billions, including everyone she was programmed to protect. In response, Sally was the one who caused the malfunction, sending a surge through Creo's systems in order to stop the vote or at least delay it. This inadvertently caused both the board's and workers' neural networks to fry, scrambled the automated robot functions, and circumnavigated the nanite protections, but we'll get to that in a second. For now, Sally does admit that she tried to lead others into resetting the mainframe server, but everyone else failed. But us. Resetting the server allowed us to access the boardroom in the hope that we could resuscitate the final board member. Doing so would split the vote 4-4 and stop Utopia's launch. But neither of us can help him as he dies on the spot and the vote is concluded 4-3, greenlighting Utopia's launch. Not all is lost. As the checklist for the launch commences, the nucleus is now opened, and Warren still has a chance to stop the payload. Plus, it seems like we were not the only ones to have a thought of a contingency plan, as a trail of audio logs talks about a failsafe to Utopia, which would need to be uploaded before the launch. Oh, what the hell is that? Turns out the nanites don't just adapt to human flesh, but are creating their own matter and even consciousness. It, or they, know Warren is there to stop the payload and their distribution globally, and sends what the game dubs as chrysalises against you. Their design was unique compared to the enemies thus far, with nanites protruding from most of their body, and were insanely quick. There was another nanite enemy that was fully encased and was much slower than the chrysalis, but had a frickin' laser gun, so I tried not to engage with them. I was hyped up to see what the final confrontation would look like, but before we get to that, I do want to mention how awesome this level design mechanic was. Sabotaging the launch requires Warren to traverse 3 different areas within the level to upload the failed safe and turn off the power regulators to the rocket. Luckily, you won't have to be taking lifts down each time you want to use the ops station, because the thing comes with you when you find the right button. I really enjoyed this mechanic for a couple of reasons, one being the physical progression, 2 it made leveling and upgrading easier before the final boss, and 3 it culminates in lowering the ops center back to its original position, allowing access to the boss arena. The build up to the launch was my favorite part of the game. The visuals were striking, seeing how the nanites have spread throughout the nucleus, and the chilling audio log realization that the nanites are quickly becoming the new apex lifeform, which is ironic since they were made to save humanity, not end it.
It's magnificent. I have to admire it. Each day it develops further. There are ghosts and echoes in the code. The original processes have merged with millions of others. Not just code either. I ran an EEG. There's gamma waves there. Replications of human thought patterns. It's alive. They're developing new processes. New routines. The nanites shouldn't be able to evolve on their own, but they are.
Maybe end it is the wrong term, because some of the scientists' logs think that the physical absorption takes human memories with it, sort of like Evangelion's human instrumentality project. This might have some merit because before Warren fights the final boss, it tries to communicate using human voices.
Is it intelligent? Aware? Honestly, we don't want to hurt you.
But it won't save it.
I recommend termination.
It sent a shiver down my spine hearing the new life form deliberate whether or not to kill us, even during the battle. It has a line about how gods shouldn't kill. And Warren doesn't have a choice to negotiate, since letting Rogue Process, the name of the nanite conscious, launch itself would mean the end of humanity as we know it. The 2-phase fight was fun and difficult. At first you'll need to target the monstrosity's limbs and quickly dodge out of the way of its defenses. Then it morphs into a more human form with a locked-on mechanic that needed precise timing. For a final fight, this had everything, and eventually Rogue Process is defeated. But the rocket still launches and the ending is, well, vague. Even though Warren installed the failsafe and disrupted power to the rocket, the final dialogue is from an outside security team saying multiple rockets have launched with no word from inside the Creo facility. Their satellites picked up unknown particulates surrounding the facility, and the latest payloads are completely different than the previous ones. Then we hear Rogue Process. I think we lost.
What the? Captain? Captain! I want another team in there right now!
See how they run.
There are some quick clips of Warren awakening after the launch and reaching for his wheelchair, which somehow appeared there, and that's the Surge. But wait, what's this in New Game Plus? If you do start a new game, right before you choose your exosuit, there are now bloodstains all over the floor, like someone got dragged away bleeding profusely. There were a couple of theories on this, and it really made me question if Warren was in a simulation. That would kind of explain how we respawn, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I'm also excited about the sequel and how it ties into this ending. If Rogue Process truly has taken over the world, how do we fight back? Is it even going to be Warren as the main protagonist? Well, we'll figure that out another day. Thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the game, what aspects you enjoyed, what you didn't like, and anything else. I think The Surge deserves more recognition than it's gained in the past couple of years. The gameplay was slow but fluid, the story was intriguing despite it being a bit confusing, and I love the departure from more swords and shields to nanites and exosuits. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, it helps out the channel a lot, and until next time, all the best.
I don't claim to know the one truth, because there isn't one. Everybody takes sides, and always their own. Good, evil, all nonsense and totally subjective.